one thing that we need to realize is that life is a cycle, and death is a normal part of the cycle of life. As people are born, people are dying as well. You know, we come into this world as babies, we grow up, and we go through the cycle until death happens. And nobody can say when death will happen. So it's part of the cycle of life. A few nights ago, I had a tough conversation with a dear older friend of mine who had two sons in their 20s, and the younger one passed on not up to 3 weeks ago. It's been something that has really devastated that family. There's a lot of anger at the moment, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, you know. So I found myself in a situation where I had to offer comfort to her. How do you tell a mother? What do you say to a mother who loses a young son in his early 20s, a son that was so ambitious, that had a lot of dreams for his life? What do you say to that kind of person? So loss can be really, really traumatic. Bad days, difficult days can be traumatic for your children as well. Remember, if you're going through loss, it's not just you alone who is going through that loss. Your children are experiencing it as well, because a lot of times we tend to trivialize the grief of the children. We think they are too young, they don't really understand, especially if you have really young children. That's not really true. Your children are going through grief as well. It can be really traumatic for them, and if they lack the tools to help them deal with this situation, it could really go bad. And as parents, you know, sometimes we do our best to cushion the fallout of traumatic experiences for our children, but usually not all is completely in our control. Regardless of your efforts, life will happen. And when it comes to children, the length and the depth of their grief differs from child to child. It depends on their age, it depends on their personality, it depends on the type of experience they've had, and even their birth order. I was listening to an older woman in her 80s talk about grief, and she said that studies have shown that children who are like only children, they grow up as the only child in a family, tend to handle loss a bit better. They're used to being alone and all of that than a child who grew up in a family where there were other siblings. So a lot of these factors come into place when children are dealing with loss. And let me reiterate again that it is not only death that can usher in grief. Any traumatic circumstances can trigger grief, like divorce, like abuse, like bullying, like if your family changes location. It can be because your child is faced with the reality that the friends that they have made, they might not see them anymore, and it could trigger grief. The grief lessens, of course, as time goes on, but do not force your children to get over it. Give them the space to mourn and give them the space to grieve. You know, just when I thought, okay, that at least we made reasonable progress from the initial time of loss, something happened that triggered the whole grief and crying bout once again. My youngest daughter wrote a letter. She wrote a note on the whiteboard in our room to her father, and in that letter she expressed regret that her father did not stay to see her get into grade 5, that her older sister is now an adult, has turned 18, that her other older sister is now 18, her brother is now 16. So she said there's no day that passes that she will not think of him. And when we read that letter on the board, it was really, it triggered a lot of tears in the house, you know. So each child will process at their own pace. Do not hurry them. Do not tell them it's been a while, you're supposed to be over this by now. You know, some of them might want to talk, some children want to talk, some want time alone, and they will retreat. Some children, their grief is obvious, it's loud, you can see it, but for some it's not so obvious. Like my son retreated. He did not really want to talk, he kind of withdrew into a shell, and I respected his space. I did not force him initially, and each time there was an opportunity, I would encourage him to share his feelings. and I would be patient. If he was willing to share, I would listen. If he wasn't willing to share, I would give him the space. And when he was ready, eventually, he opened up to me. He eventually opened up to me. He shared his fears. He even told me that he felt mourning his father by wanting to be happy. And I had to tell him that, look, do not worry. You know, your father would have wanted you to be happy. So don't feel guilty for wanting to be happy. And he asked to go to the morgue. When he requested to go to the morgue to see his father, I wasn't sure. Then he was 15. He hadn't turned 16. I wasn't sure whether it was a good thing to do, whether he was ready to face the trauma of seeing his father's body. You know, I spoke with one or two people, and they too were not quite sure, but one of them said, okay, maybe it could give him some sort of closure to go there. So I decided, okay, let's go. I braced up to take the bull by the horn. So we went to the morgue, and surprisingly, when we got to the morgue, I went there with my mom, I went there with my sibling and my son and some staff members. When we got into the viewing room, he asked to be left alone with his father's body. And that was another one for me. I was surprised at his boldness. You know, I was expecting that he was going to break down and all of that. And he asked to be excused. So we stepped out of the viewing room, and he stood there with his father's corpse, and he was speaking to him. Eventually, he just gave me a summary of what he said, that he was telling his father thank you for all the sacrifices, for all the things he's done for him over the years. Even though later on he said it really, when he thought of it, it really affected him emotionally. But with time, he has been able to deal with it. And some days later, his sisters, my daughters, wanted to go to the morgue as well. So I took two of them. The younger one, my youngest, was 9 then. She didn't want to go, and I didn't push her to go. So I took the 12-year-old at that time and my 17-year-old at that time. They are both 13 and 18 now. And they went there, asked to be left alone, both of them in there, and they spoke to their father. When they came out, my youngest said that she was telling her dad about the latest TikTok trends, talking to her father about that. And it was an experience that was bittersweet for us. So I think that experience at the morgue kind of helped them a great deal, because by the time we came back, I noticed that my son was a bit more relaxed, and it was as if it helped him come to terms, because he said that for the longest time he didn't actually believe that it was true that his father had died. So that experience helped the children a lot with processing the loss. So there are some realities when loss happens that your children need to face. Some things that you need to let them know. One of the things that we've done as a family, even when my husband was here, is that we communicate a lot with the children. Most mornings before the children leave for school, if we are both in town, they come into our room and we speak to them. We read devotionals and we share life experiences with them. And I didn't stop it after their father passed on. It's a tradition that we are still continue. So it gives me an opportunity to hear what they are thinking, to be able to engage with them, to be able to debunk myths and all of that. So your children need to understand that bad things happen to good people, and most times one doesn't have answers, and they need to understand that life is not always fair. We would expect that, being the kind of person their father was, very loving, very caring, very giving, very supportive, fun going. He was every child's dream of a father. You would have thought that, okay, with all these qualities and the way he was going about helping people, he would deny himself to help somebody in need. You'd have thought that, okay, that somehow that disaster could have been averted. So the children need to know that despite all of those factors, that life is not always fair. They need to understand that. So it's in that communication process, those sessions of, don't shut your children out of the process. Let them be a part of the grieving process with you. Talk to them a lot. Even before, don't wait until disaster happens to start talking to your children about life, to start talking to your children about death. Talk to them about it, not necessarily telling them, oh, I'm going to die. Let them understand that death is a normal part of life. To live is to risk dying. So handling of pain and trials as a family makes the load far easier for the children to bear, or a responsible adult who is a good support system could also help your children through this process. In my own case, it has been my siblings, my mom, close friends. They've been a wonderful support system. Even colleagues at work, some colleagues at work, they've been a wonderful support system for not just me but my children as well. Hopefully you would have introduced your child to your faith support system. So you need to point them to God or whatever your belief system is, and make them realize that they have an anchor in their faith, because going through loss without having an anchor support in terms of your faith could be more devastating than it should be. And like I've said in subsequent videos, one of the things that has helped us as a family to process this season of loss has been our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Our faith in God has really helped us a whole lot. So tough times will come as long as you are alive. Let your children understand this. It's a part of life and living. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and sometimes it can throw you a curveball without any warning, like it did us in December 26, 2020. That's a date in our family life that will forever be etched in our memory. So when these things happen, there are some you're not sometimes your body processes the loss in a way that you're not in charge of how your body chooses to react sometimes. So do not feel guilty for sometimes feeling the way you do. Do not feel guilty for feeling tired, you just want to shut down, you feel as if you want to isolate. Don't blame yourself. It's the whole grieving process that has caused that to happen. So don't feel guilty. It's part of the process, and hopefully if it is well managed, you can heal properly. Don't try to make the pain go away for your children, because you cannot. People who really know you, for instance, if you're going through grief, even as an adult, your closest people, your closest friends who know you and who understand the cycle of grief will allow you to feel the hurt. They will allow you to grieve and not offer you glib explanations or try to maybe tell you, don't cry, you need to be strong. Please don't listen to anybody who tells you that you need to be strong. What happened is devastating. You don't need to be strong. Cry if you must, break down if you must. It's part of it. So don't shield your children. If your friends give you this benefit of allowing you, or your family of allowing you to grieve, please allow your children to grieve. I do not try to get in the way of the grief for them. When you're grieving, the people who really understand you, your closest support system, they will follow up on you. They will check in to see how you're doing, but they will not try to make the process go away. So don't do that for your children. Offer your children the same support. Follow your child's lead also and respond to that. If they want to talk, you talk. If they want to be left alone, please leave them alone, because what has happened is something really, really devastating. Leave them to mourn at their space, to grieve at their space, but check in on them and follow their lead. For instance, I give lots of hugs. My children, for any reason and no reason, they'll just walk up to me and indicate that they want to hug, and I will hug them. My youngest, my 10-year-old, she will hug me so tightly as if her whole life depends on it. So I give lots of hugs, and it's triple what was going on before, and I reassure them as much as possible that yes, we are going through this painful, traumatizing period, but everything is going to be okay. So I give lots of reassurances. You need to reassure your children. So how do you respond when your spouse dies, for instance, and your child wants to die as well? My 9-year-old at the time, she's 10 now, during the early times when her dad passed on, she came to me one day when the pain was so raw. She came to me one day and she told me that she wanted to go and be with her father where her father is as well. So I had to handle that. I had to talk with her. I had to let her know that yes, her father is not here again. It's a painful reality, but I am here for her, you know. So I asked her whether she wanted to leave me, you know, because going to be with your daddy means that you want to die as well. And she said no, she didn't want to die, and I understood that it was because of the rawness of the pain. She was so attached to her father. She was like his handbag, like they say. So I had to reassure her and let her know that it will be well in the end.